Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to the weekly Dhamma study group where we will read together Buddha's texts. Today we'll continue with our reading of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary by the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And we are joined by Venerable Dhammo, who is residing in Sri Lanka at the Sri Mangalo International Meditation Center. After we finish with 1 hour of reading, we will stop and have time for discussion and Q&A. And before we begin, we will take together the 5 precepts. Everyone is welcome to join us and recite with us. Is there anyone in the reading group who would like to lead the precepts today?
I would like to.
Okay, thank you, Mila. When you're ready, you can start.
Ang bante visaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tutiyampi ahang bante visaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi ahang bante visaranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Seems like Mila disconnected. Wait. Okay. Mila? Yeah, you may continue.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisarnagamanang nititang.
Bhante.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Dinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kāmesu micchācārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Surameraya Manjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura Miraya Majja Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugating Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibbutiং Yanti Tasma Silang Visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu.
I posted the reading order in which we will read today in the chat, but I will also quickly explain the reading today. So we'll each read 2 paragraphs, and if it's very short, you can, if you like, read 1 more paragraph. And please remember to take a pause in between each paragraph so there's time for some reflection, asking questions, or explanations. And please read slowly and carefully. And we are currently under the title Momentary Concentration for Insight. It's the PDF page 78. And we are starting with the paragraph with regard to the above. Today we would continue, since Ibitsu was the last reader, with you, Austin. If you may start for us.
Yes. With regard to the above statement that attention to elements is an object of meditation for access concentration, we have the authority of the Visuddhimagga, which mentions this meditation object as analysis of the 4 elements. No doubt should also be entertained about our assertion that contemplation of body postures and clear comprehension leads to access concentration. Because the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta definitely confirms them to be meditation objects for access concentration.
Again, not to go into too much detail, but just to review what we talked about last week. Access concentration is concentration that is free from the 5 hindrances, but is not yet fixed or focused on a single object. So it's usually used to refer to meditation that is approaching that state of absorption, but isn't there yet. But why he's repeating and stressing this point about access concentration is because you need some form of concentration that is free from the hindrances in order for the mind to see clearly. So either for the clear vision of an object, which would lead to of a conceptual object, which would lead to trance or tranquility, or a clear vision and clear observation of the reality, the experiences, which leads to wisdom, which allows you to see their impermanent nature, their unsatisfying nature, their uncontrollable nature. So you need that. So and he'd be dealing with critics as well who would say, look, if you're not practicing samatha meditation, you're never going to attain this sort of concentration, which he's pointing out, goes against what the tradition says from ancient times. So these ancient meditation teachers and scholars and teachers were quite clear. So he's talking about the commentary of the Satipatthana Sutta, which talks about various objects of meditation that are sufficient to lead to this type of concentration, where the hindrances are dispelled, where the mind is free from liking, disliking, drowsiness, distraction, doubt, where the mind is strong and clear and pure.
In addition, according to the section on contemplation of feelings, mindfulness of feelings, the mind and mental objects at the moment of their arising will lead to the development of access concentration and insight knowledge. Therefore, the Visuddhimagga gives, at the beginning of the chapter on purification of view, a description on how a person who begins practicing bare insight straightway contemplates the four primary elements, followed by discernment of 18 elements, 12 bases, and the 5 aggregates. This is in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha as provided in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta.
By now, having heard the above explanations and considerations, it should be possible to understand how to develop the path factor of right mindfulness in conformity with the discourses of the Blessed One. Having understood, one should be able to determine whether mere recitation of and reflection on what one has learned from the scriptures, instead of mindfully noting the body, feelings, the mind, and the mental objects at the moment of their arising, leads to the right mindfulness. It is plain, too, that in the absence of the proper path factor of right mindfulness, that the path factor of right view can never be established.
Genuine insight only by mindful noting. In order to further strengthen the argument, I will quote a passage from the Mahasatipatthana Sutta commentary. Yasma panna kaya vedana chitta dhammesu kanchitamang anama pitva bhavana namanati tasma depi iminava magena loka parideve samati kantati veditava, which means it should be understood that there is no development of insight pertaining to knowledge of the Noble Path without contemplating the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Therefore, it should be realized that the minister Santati and Patachara Theri, who were said to have attained the higher knowledge of the Noble Path and fruition while listening to a discourse, had overcome their sorrow and lamentation only through the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness.
So there's a parenthesis missing there. It should be after the word discourse. So these two, I don't know if we've mentioned them in this. Has he mentioned them before? I don't think so. Santati, these are the two, Santati and Patacha are the two examples mentioned in the Satipatthana Sutta commentary. So in the commentary in the Satipatthana Sutta, you can read it in this great book, The Way of Mindfulness, which is a translation of the Satipatthana Sutta and its commentary, or most of the commentary, and some sub-commentary in English. Under the heading of overcoming sorrow lamentation, the examples given are these two, which is why he mentions them. So just briefly, Santati was a minister of the king, and he was responsible for quelling this rebellion. And so the king gave him great reward and allowed him to have the luxury of a king for 7 days. And so for 7 days he had this luxury, and he had this dancing girl who was dancing for him, and he drank alcohol and ate great food and that sort of thing. And one day when he was a little bit drunk, this woman who had been abstaining from food, I think, she was not very well because she was trying to be the perfect dancer or something, but she just died. She was committed to being this royal dancing whatever, and she just had an aneurysm or something and fell to the ground. This actually happens to people, apparently. I've had students who told me about their friends and relatives, and one man in the village here had this happen where he just suddenly fell down. Why? I mean, I'm sure that, I guess the medical community knows. Anyway, he was devastated because he was quite attached to this woman, and he had seen the Buddha walking on alms round that morning, and so he thought of the Buddha immediately and sobered up and went to see the Buddha and became an arahant. The Buddha taught him the Dhamma, and he became enlightened, apparently. Patachara was, well, her story is quite long, and you can look it up, but the gist of it is, I've told her story before. The gist of it is she married someone who her parents didn't approve of. They had to escape and live in poverty. And on their way home, she was pregnant. Her husband got bit by a snake. Her 2 children one got carried away as she was crossing a river. The other was picked up by a bird of prey. And she returned to her parents' village to find that during a storm, their house had burnt down and they'd all died. So she lost her whole family. She went crazy. She was overcome by grief. And so she went to the Buddha, listened to him teach, and became, I think, a Sotapanna when she heard the Buddha teach. So it sounds like the point is, it sounds like they heard the Buddha speaking and became enlightened from his speech, and he's just pointing out that that can't possibly be the case, of course. There's no attainment of wisdom without contemplation of the 4 satipatthana. So they must have done that as a result of his teaching.
The commentary is very clear on this point. It is not just listening to the teaching, but contemplation on the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects that help them to attain higher knowledge. Without contemplating on any of them, it is impossible to develop insight nor knowledge pertaining to the noble path and its fruition. It is very clear, therefore, that mere learning of the definition and classifications of mind and matter and reflecting on them without actually noting them as they arise within one's body will never develop the proper path factor of right view otherwise called insight knowledge or the knowledge pertaining to the Noble Path.
Yeah, it's important because, of course, there are Buddhists in Buddhist countries and newcomers to Buddhism in non-Buddhist countries who content themselves with study of the Buddhist teaching. This is a problem both in Buddhist culture and outside of Buddhist culture, where people have a belief or a perception of understanding the Buddhist teaching just by studying it. In fact, there's very little study that needs to be done. You can, of course, study all of the Buddhist teaching. It's useful if you're teaching, right? You can see having some knowledge is useful. Not having knowledge as a teacher can be problematic, even harmful. But for the practice and development of the path that leads to freedom from suffering, peace, and happiness, there's not a lot you need to know. And so we harp on the basics. This is why we go over and over again, reiterate the importance of mindfulness. There are very few things you need to learn. But if you don't learn them, you can't practice, and if you learn them but don't practice them, they're also useless.
Here, right mindfulness alone will not bring about the desired objective. Having achieved right mindfulness, it is only by comprehending the truth as it really is that the desire and is attained. Therefore, in the summarized introduction to the Satipatthana Sutta cited above, it is mentioned to maintain ardent mindfulness with clear comprehension. In the exposition of this summarized introduction, terms such as ajanati, to know in different ways, or samudaya dhammanupasi, to know the cause of arising and ceasing, are employed.
It's a little bit interesting. I'm not quite sure of this, exactly what he's saying. I mean, it's problematic if you suggest that there's something further that needs to be done, like after you're mindful, then what do you do after? But he doesn't say that. He says to maintain ardent mindfulness with clear comprehension. So it is possible to be mindful of something that is a concept, and that would never lead to insight. And therefore, it's true, mindfulness is not the proper object. But if it's mindfulness of the proper object, all of the rest comes by itself. There is no need for seeking out, say, the three characteristics. I mean, in basic terms, all that you're aiming for with mindfulness is to develop or evoke the knowledge and the familiarity with the three characteristics. And there's absolutely never a need or value in seeking out the three characteristics. You don't actually gain anything from adding something after being mindful. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't talk about adding, right? He says, maintain ardent mindfulness with clear comprehension. The clear comprehension part comes about by having the proper object. If mindfulness is focused on the proper object, there is clear comprehension. In other words, you see the three characteristics automatically. I guess that being said, another thing that he's pointing out is that it has to be consistent, methodical, it has to be continuous. Because being mindful once, even seeing the three characteristics once, isn't going to be enough. It has to be continuous and progressive, and it will lead you through stages of knowledge where you have a gradual appreciation of the truth and the importance of the three characteristics, and the truth and the reality of nothing being worth clinging to. that allows you to, or that triggers the letting go.
We have, therefore, summarized this path factor of right mindfulness as follows. To develop right mindfulness, there must be ardent mindfulness with clear comprehension of every bodily movement, every mental action, every feeling, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, whichever manifests, and every mental object as it appears.
Just to reiterate, I don't think mental object is the right translation of Dhamma here. I've talked about why I think that is. It seems highly unlikely that that's a proper translation. It just doesn't really make sense and doesn't fit the context of what is under the heading of Dhammas. It's more somewhere between reality and teaching. So it's the things the Buddha taught, but it's also the realities that the Buddha taught, and it also has the implication of progression on the path. So it's related to practice, related to the progress leading to the Dhamma, leading to the ultimate realization of Nibbana. It starts with the hindrances and goes on. I've talked about this before. But mental object is, as a translation for Dhamma, is completely different and used in a very specific case. It's just confusing.
And should it be better untranslated? Should it be better untranslated and just Dhammas or Dhamma?
Yeah. That doesn't have any meaning for a lot of people.
I have taken time to discuss in detail the path factor of right mindfulness, as it is very important for the understanding of many people. I will proceed with the consideration of the path factor of right concentration. For that, I will confine myself only to the most essential points of the teaching concerning the path factor of right concentration. To give all expositions on the subject would cover too wide a scope and would be hard to grasp by those with limited knowledge.
Right, so concentration, as we've seen from our study of the Visuddhimagga, I think he's referring to the fact that it can describe many different types of application of mind, like from anything from metta meditation, like friendliness, cultivating friendliness to all beings, to contemplating death or the parts of the body, the hair, the nails, the teeth, the flesh, and so on. So he's just going to give the basics. And there are, of course, many types of concentration-based practices that don't apply to our tradition and that we don't concern ourselves with. So in our tradition especially, we're really just focused on what is necessary for the path.
Susan, are you able to read today?
Yes, sorry for the delay. So, the path factor of right concentration. What, monks, is right concentration? Here, monks, a monk, being detached from all desires and other unwholesome states, enters into and abides in the first absorption, accompanied by initial vitakka and sustained application, vikara, filled with joy, piti, and happiness, sukha, born of detachment from unwholesome thoughts. He enters into and abides in the fourth absorption, accompanied by equanimity and purified by mindfulness. This, monks, is called right concentration.
won't talk about this, but I'll just mention in advance, just to be clear, if you look at this paragraph, I mean, it may be nitpicking, but it's important because people use this statement as an absolutist claim that you need these to be said to have right concentration. This I've been confronted with this many, many times by monks, lay people, who will pull up this quote and say, you see, if you don't enter into the jhanas, you don't have right concentration. It's not that simple. First of all, literally, this quote does not say that. It does not say, without these, you don't have right concentration. It says these are right concentration. Absolutely, they are right concentration. First thing. Second thing, what he's going to talk about is that there are types of concentration, as we've seen, that we call access concentration, that are of the same quality as what you normally call jhana meditation, jhana concentration or concentration. And thirdly, no matter which path you follow, at the moment of the actual noble path, you do absolutely enter into what can be only termed as a jhana, an absorption, but the object is nibbana. So ultimately you are in that state. But with these, he's actually talking about the preliminary path. And he's only talking about the highest form. There are absolutely other forms of concentration. And finally, what you call jhana is going to depend on what group you follow. And if you listen to anyone's definition and description of jhana, it's going to differ from pretty much everyone else who describes jhana. This is an issue that you find even among those people who claim that you need this absorbed state to gain wisdom. I mean, it's really, as he says, dogmatic, and it doesn't reflect in in actual practice, in reality. I mean, having dogmatic views that it must be like this and it can't be any other way only work if experience shows and practice shows that, which it doesn't. There are people who practice and with attaining momentary concentration every day for since the time of the Buddha, who have gained deep insight into the truth of life. Furthermore, I guess even one more thing we can say is that actual absorption is not very good for seeing clearly, because absorption is focused on a single object. So a lot of the meditation that claims to allow you to enter into jhana doesn't actually directly lead to wisdom, because as we've pointed out, as the Mahasi Sayadaw has pointed out, the object is not reality. You're not focused on things that can create wisdom and allow you to see the three characteristics. So even if you were to say that this is saying that you need a fixed state of mind, even that fixed state of mind, or after entering to that fixed state of mind, you have to do something further. You have to come out of it and observe either those qualities that you developed, like the calm, observe that which is not calm, the new state of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting, of momentary experience, with the power of that concentration, in order to see the three characteristics, in order to let go. Because you can't let go in jhana. There's no letting go. The mind is fixed and focused on a single object. There's no dispassion. There's no freedom. Well, I guess, which all points out is a little bit complicated, and this is all very scholarly, and it's a scholarly debate that we don't have to care too much about. But just be clear. I mean, if you have any doubts, then apply practice and see for yourself. And you can appreciate the difference between just entering into a trance based on a conceptual object versus paying attention to ultimate reality. There's a categorical difference. focusing on your experience versus, these creative visualization exercises that you hear about, or a mantra, a spiritual mantra that you repeat again and again and again that has nothing to do with your experience. None of those actually none of them are enough to lead to wisdom.
Here, absorption, jhana, means not allowing the mind to wander about, but fixing it on a single object to remain tranquil. According to the suttas, there are 4 absorptions. Five factors accompany the first absorption. Initial application, vitakka, directing the mind towards the meditation object. Sustained application, vikara, repeated investigation of the object, which has manifested. Joy, piti, rapture or delight, happiness, sukha, bliss or pleasant feeling, one-pointedness, akaggata, a calm, unified mind.
So this is the best you get as far as a definition of what jhana is. Jhana has these 5 factors. The first 2 are a little bit confusing, sometimes translated in different ways, but I think this is the most accurate. Vitakka is applying the mind to an object. So when you're picking a specific object to focus on, you have to apply the mind to it again and again and again. But you only enter into the jhana when your mind has vitakka, has vichara as well. Vichara means staying with the object, contemplating it. In the first jhana, there is still this activity of repeatedly applying the mind to the object and considering it. What's the word? Contemplating it. Piti is the excitement, sort of the thrill. Thrill is a good description of piti. Rapture is another one. It's not really joy because that's happiness. One-pointedness just means that's the only object that the mind has again and again and again, moment after moment.
I was just thinking about when you were explaining this, that even when we are mindful of a moment, it seems like it's similar in that moment, in the sense that you have to send your mind out to the object, and then you have to, the mind has to stay with whatever it is focused on. And then there is a sense of happiness, in the sense that, because you're equanimous about it. And in the sense that it's quite similar in that it just came to me that both were, for a moment, it was quite sounding similar.
Yeah, well, one-pointedness really, it's classically or ordinarily it refers to taking a single object again and again and again, moment after moment. But there is a sense in that you have a singularity of mind focused on the 3 characteristics when you observe objects, especially because at the knowledge of Sankarupeka, everything just is seen as impermanent, suffering, and non-self. In other words, objectively, neutral. mind experiences every moment in the same way. So there's a sameness to it, and because of the equanimity. So it is likened to jhana. It's not jhana, it's access concentration. That's why it's called access concentration. It's like jhana, but it's not absorption. So it doesn't technically have ekagata.
Right, right.
In the second absorption, with the fading away of initial and sustained application, only three factors remain: joy, happiness, and one-pointedness. In the third absorption, with the fading away of joy, only two factors, happiness and one-pointedness, remain. In the fourth absorption, happiness is replaced by equanimity, so that only equanimity and one-pointedness remain.
So as you develop state of absorption, it becomes increasingly refined. So eventually the application to the object and the contemplating of the object is no longer necessary. The mind is just with the object. That's the second jhana. And then the excitement about it, the thrill, this more refined. And so it starts to even feel coarse to be thrilled about it. So the mind abandons this thrill and this excitement, this rapture. It's just very, very still. And there's just a happy state. And then even the happiness just seems irrelevant. So the mind just lets go of the happiness as well, and it's equanimous, peaceful, fixed. Again, this is mostly applicable to the practice of tranquility, but you can liken, again, the state of Sankarupeka jnana to the fourth jhana, and Mahasi Sayadaw points this out. It's not jhana in the technical sense, but it's a similar quality. But these are actually referring to tranquility, and they're not helpful in and of themselves, which is what he's going to say in the next paragraph. That in and of themselves, they're not helpful. They can be used as the basis to cultivate insight because they're very strong states of mind. So if you then apply that strength to ordinary experience, you can see the three characteristics quite easily. But if you don't, someone can practice these for their whole life and never gain any ounce of wisdom.
These four absorptions may be mundane, lokiya, also known as form, rupa vachara, and formless, arupa vachara, jhana, or supermundane, lokuttara, if accompanying noble path consciousness. Supramundane absorption is the genuine path factor of right concentration. Mundane absorption may be classed as the path factor of right concentration if it forms the basis for the development of insight.
So again, there's two paths. There's the path of practice and the technical path, which is the moment that frees one from defilements. It's called the path because it's the thing that leads to the goal. That one moment leads to the next moment, which is freedom, right? You need one moment because you have to define the moment that led to the freedom, the moment before the freedom. And that's that one moment. So technically that's and frees one from defilements. But practically speaking, we're practicing all the time, every day. We're cultivating the path. in our own way, and that's mundane. So jhana can be mundane, but jhana is only part of the mundane. Jhana is only if it forms the basis for the development of vipassana, seeing clearly, not quite insight, but the development of, well, seeing clearly and ultimately wisdom into the three characteristics.
Insight without absorption. Hanging on to this statement, some say that insight can be developed only after achieving purification of mind through the attainment through attaining absorption, jhana. Without absorption, purification of mind cannot be attained, and so insight cannot be developed. This is one-sided, dogmatic view. That access concentration in the neighborhood of absorption, having the capacity to suppress the hindrances, can help attain the purification of view, leading to the development of insight. That many have achieved arahantship by thus developing insight is explicitly stated in the Visuddhimagga. In the Sutana Pitaka, for example, in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, there is very clear teaching that arahantship may be achieved by contemplating objects such as body postures, which can only give rise to access concentration. The Anusatithana Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya states that the concentration developed by recollecting the virtues of the Blessed One is adequate to use as a basis for the development of higher knowledge up to the state of arahantship. The commentaries that expound on the section of clear comprehension also definitely affirm that joy, piti, can be aroused by recollecting the virtues of the Blessed One and the Sangha, and that the joy so aroused can be contemplated as being perishable, as being impermanent, resulting subsequently in the attainment of arahantship.
Yeah, that's interesting because mindfulness of the Buddha is a very common meditation practice. It doesn't lead to jhana, according to the commentaries, according to the Visuddhimagga, which makes sense. It's not an object. The problem is, if it were an image of the Buddha, then maybe it could lead to jhana, but that's not. With mindfulness of the Buddha, you're not actually focusing on like a Buddha image. You're not looking at a Buddha and saying, Buddha, Buddha. You're thinking of the qualities of the Buddha, his wisdom, his purification. And those qualities are, as objects of contemplation, ephemeral. You can't cling to them because they're real, they're qualities of mind. So you use it as a means of comparing yourself and realizing how great the Buddha was in his purity and his clarity of mind and his greatness and wisdom and so on. But it's important to point out that even that, it's not a bad thing to do. We might scoff at it and say, well, that's not mindfulness practice, but you can use it to cultivate a pure state of mind, and then use that pure state of mind, strong state of mind, to cultivate insight, especially if you focus on the joy, things like the joy and the calm and the peace that come from sort of focus. That's the crux of it. if you're going to practice samatha, you have to eventually switch to practicing vipassana anyway.
These authorities state further that innumerable people, hundreds of thousands, millions, and tens of millions, who became liberated during discourses given by the Buddha, were not all skilled in absorptions. It is probable that many of them were unequipped with any such attainments. However, they must have achieved purification of mind because their minds were described as responsive, tender, free from hindrances, excellent, and pure. The commentaries clearly state that it was at such opportune moments that the Blessed One delivered the most exalted, sublime teachings of the Four Noble Truths, which the Buddhas alone can expound. They also clearly state that his audience attained higher knowledge as a consequence of listening to such teachings.
In view of such consideration, the definition given in the teachings on right concentration in terms of the four absorptions should be regarded as a superlative method of description. Access concentration, although described as an inferior way, may also be taken as right concentration, which can accomplish purification of mind. The set access concentration has the same characteristics of suppressing the hindrances as the first absorption. It is also similar in having the same 5 jhana factors of initial application, sustained application, joy, happiness, and one-pointedness. Consequently, we take it that the Blessed One had included both the proper access concentration and the nominal access concentration under the category of the first jhana as an inferior way of definition.
For many people, a lot of this conversation is just unfamiliar, might seem confusing, strange, overly complicated. The problem is these are the sorts of conversations that take place in Buddhist cultures and amongst Buddhist traditions, and there are people out there who are adamant that the Mahasi Sayadaw and his followers are and were wrong, not the teaching of the Buddha, misguided, misled, and practicing something that is futile and useless. It's been a huge problem since the time of the Mahasi Sayadaw. In Burma, it became a big issue. It spilled over into Sri Lanka, it spilled over into Thailand. And yet, people who actually put it into practice changed their lives, you know. So, you don't have to worry too much about this. Just be clear why he's talking about it is because there are some very strong and dogmatic accusations that have been leveled towards this tradition by people who are quite fond of samatha practice, which it's not wrong, but I think their fondness for samatha practice colors their perception, makes them biased, and it's okay that's what they want to do for sure, but to then be very dogmatic about it's the only way and that sort of thing is just not accurate and problematic, because for many of them it means they're just going to be stuck in the practice of samatha meditation, which when you explain it clearly like this, it seems ridiculous that somehow that would be enough, that without actually paying attention to reality you could somehow become enlightened. And it's suspicious, because how many other traditions out there that practice meditation, non-Buddhist traditions like Hinduism, that who claim to be enlightened when all they do is just fix and focus their minds and never gain any insight into the three characteristics. Ordinary meditation throughout the world, outside of Buddhism, inside of Buddhism, is all just tranquility. The Buddha's teaching is special because it offers something very, very different. And if you read through the Buddha's teaching, how often, how constant was he reminding us of the five aggregates and the three characteristics and dependent origination and all these things, the six senses. How core are all these things that you would just ignore with the practice of samatha? You just focus on a concept, on a single object, on tranquility, and focus on this one aspect of the Buddhist teaching of cultivation of concentration. It's mostly, again, out of bias, because it's very comfortable and peaceful and pleasant. And that's not a bad thing, but it can be dangerous if you're attached to it. Or dangerous in the sense that you just get stuck and lost, can get lost in it. But you don't have to understand all that's being said or worry too much about it. This is just a detailed explanation of how concentration arises in the practice of vipassana. And I mean, the important thing is to understand there are two types of meditation. Most meditation just calms you down, but there is meditation that allows you to see clearly, but it's necessary to focus on reality to do that, to focus on your own experience.
Absorption means closely observing an object with fixed attention. Fixed attention to a selected object of meditation, such as respiration for tranquility, concentration, gives rise to samatha jhana, whereas noting the characteristics of mind and matter while contemplating their three characteristics gives rise to vipassana jhana. I give the following summary for easy recall. 1. Close observation with fixed attention is called jhana. 2. There are two types of jhana, samatha jhana and vipassana jhana. 3. Fixed attention to develop tranquility is called samatha jhana. 4. Contemplating the three characteristics is vipassana jhana. And 5. There are three kinds of concentration: momentary, khanika, excess, upachara, and absorption or fixed, appanna, concentration.
Yeah, so this is actually in the commentaries. They'll talk about the two types of jhana. They don't use the word samatha jhana and vipassana jhana. I don't think I've never seen these words used. I've never seen the word vipassana jhana used. That's a term I think he's made up. I'm not sure, but the words they use are aramanupani jhana, which means meditation on an object. It means a specific object, a conceptual object. And lakhanupani jhana, where you're fixed and focused on the three characteristics. That's how they're described. So it's quite important what he's saying here, that jhana is close observation with fixed attention, but it can either be on an object or it can be on the three characteristics. Meaning, by seeing the three characteristics, your mind also becomes tranquil. Your mind also becomes very peaceful. But it's got the power of allowing you to let go because you're gaining wisdom about reality. about the very things that trigger liking, disliking, greed, anger, delusion. And so it's practically valuable in a way that absorption in an object isn't.
So we have crossed the hour and stopped for today with the text. And now everyone is welcome to write down their questions, or if you have a question in person, you can also ask it. I encourage everyone to ask important questions or relevant questions regarding their meditation practice, maybe regarding what we have just read. And so, yeah.
Bhante, the first question that we have: how can we know if something is a valid noting object, especially with translation issues? Is the path to ask a teacher case by case? Is there a list or a text that expands the booklet regarding this?
Well, there's not so many things you can experience. It's not like there's an unlimited list of things you can experience. I guess the confusion comes because it's not clear what is real and what is just conceptual. That should come pretty quickly. The four satipatthana are there for the very purpose. If it's within the four satipatthana, it's real. If it's not, it's not. So basically you have body, feelings, mind, and things like the hindrances and the senses, the Dhammas. That's about it. I mean, the words sometimes vary. So, for example, one of the hindrances is called vyapada, which means ill will. But in practical terms, it means any kind of disliking, which can be fear, can be anger, can be frustration. So there's many words you can use: boredom, sadness, depression. But they're all pretty clearly in the similar category. I wouldn't worry too much about the actual words that you use. But the things that you note, well, they're pretty simple. There's physical. I mean, the physical is a lot of things, but it's all just physical. Movements of the body are all just movements, right? You can note all of them. But like if you hear something, hearing is real. If you hear a cat or a dog isn't real. You don't hear a dog, you hear a sound that you interpret as a dog. So if you say dog, dog, meditation of sorts, but it's meditation on a concept. What do I mean by concept? Something that arose in your mind. It didn't arise at the ear. At the ear, there's only the arising of sound. So hearing is valid, sound is valid. But cat, dog is not. It's valid, but it's not real. So it's not valid for our meditation. It's just important you know the difference between what is concept, the four satipatthana really, which is they're explained in the booklet, and that's about it. There's not really much else. But we were going to get everyone, well, there's 2 of us with video on. Wanted to try to not just have my video up, even though I'm the only one answering the questions. I mean, other people can talk about them if you want to discuss them. Well, maybe next week.
Bhante, the next question. It's very difficult for me to be constant with meditation. Is it better to put some effort for a 1-hour session every few days, or is it better to try to do like 5 + 5 minutes every day?
It's hard to quantify how much better one is than the other. Off the top of my head, I would think that practicing every day is more valuable, but I mean, neither one is going to be great. If you can do an hour a day, that's a pretty good baseline. So if you're doing less than an hour a day, not a very good baseline. Still, I mean, it's all beneficial. Even 5 minutes once in your lifetime is not without benefit. But for development in this lifetime and attainment of Nibbana in this lifetime, to see clearly in this lifetime, you need to do more than just that. But I mean, I can't just quantify how much. It also depends very much on you. It depends on the quality of that time that you put. It depends on how prepared you are for that time. If you only do like 5 minutes every day, if you're not working on it the rest of the day, those 5 minutes are going to be pretty trivial, pretty minimal in value. Because you spend the first 5 minutes, forgetting to be mindful because you haven't practiced it. But if you've been mindful throughout the day, throughout your daily life, then even 5 minutes can be very fruitful when you just put your whole attention on it because you're ready for that.
The next question, Bhante. The text mentioned suppress the hindrances on page 71 of the second to last paragraph. Is this correct? My understanding is that we do not suppress the hindrances. We just watch/note as they arise and disappear without any judgment or analysis.
Yeah, it's not referring to that. I was going to mention this, I didn't, but I was going to comment on this word as well. But by suppress, he doesn't mean that. He doesn't mean either of those things that you're thinking of, either the practice of actively pushing them away or the act of noting them. What he means is that when you note, especially when you start to note the objects that trigger the hindrances don't arise. They don't have the opportunity to arise where they normally would. When you feel pain and you note pain, once you become skilled in that, you can say in a way that the hindrances are suppressed. What that means is they don't arise because of the quality of mind that is seeing the objects clearly, seeing the triggers clearly, the pain, you're seeing the pain clearly. And with that clarity of mind, there's no opportunity for disliking of the pain. But it also means that they are not gone. If you stop meditating, they can come back. If you stop being mindful, pain will still make you dislike the pain. So in that sense, they are suppressed. They don't arise, but it's only a temporary non-arising, which you could call suppression. We don't really in English, I don't think it's accurate to use that word suppressed, but this is a common word that it's used. I mean, it's better to just say temporarily prevented is what he's referring to. You can't actually push them away. That's not how it works. They disappear on their own. I mean, I guess you can. There are, but it's just not a great way to approach them. You can, like, distract yourself. You can be determined to not be angry or greedy. Measure that isn't really that effective. When you're mindful, you can be mindful to the point where ordinary hindrances that would ordinarily arise don't have the opportunity to arise. That's the suppression. That's what's meant by that word there. It's not a great word for that, but that's what they're referring to. I guess it might be accurate. Probably we're just thinking of the word repressed. You're not repressing them. I don't know, suppressed, repressed. I don't know what the actual definitions are, but anyway, it should be pretty clear what the actual meaning is.
The next question that we have, Bhante. In sitting meditation, my left leg goes numb after about 25 to 30 minutes. Should I start another walking and standing meditation session right after if I want a longer meditation? Please offer advice.
So we don't recommend walking after sitting. After sitting, we recommend taking a break, at least a short break. But I'm not quite sure what you're saying here. You're suggesting that you prematurely stop the sitting because your leg is going numb. If that's what you're saying, it's not really necessary. First of all, the numb leg is usually temporary. It's a part of the strengthening of the blood flow. I mean, over time, it just goes away. It should go away. Maybe it doesn't always, but it's not really an issue. You can fall asleep in the wrong position and wake up with a numb leg after hours, and it doesn't, as far as I know, have any long-term consequences. So sitting in meditation for even up to an hour with a numb leg is not a problem. It's usually strengthening because it's kind of stretching the leg a little bit, and over time it should generally just not be an issue. It's not an issue is the point. It's never an issue, and you can note it a few times, say numb, numb, rising, falling. But if you're talking about after, if it's unrelated to the foot going numb, and you're just asking whether after sitting, it's good to get up and do walking, I mean, it can be, especially if you've got extra time. You can do half walking, half sitting, half walking, half sitting. It's not bad. In a formal meditation course, we would tell you not to do this. We would say have sessions of your maximum length of walking up to an hour, followed by the same amount of sitting up to an hour. After the sitting, take a break and do that again. I mean, the goal in a formal meditation course is we're trying to get you up to doing 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting, which might seem impossible for newcomers, but is relatively simple through the progress of weeks that you're at a meditation center. I mean, it starts to come just naturally and remarkably easy. So that's what we're working towards, and breaking it down into shorter periods is kind of just making it too easy for yourself. The training isn't allowed to progress because you're trying to make it easier by doing that. But at home, I mean, that's great. What you're talking about is great. Doing what you're doing is great. It's more than most people are able to do. So you don't have to worry too much about the formal form that the meditation takes. Do what you can, and the more the better, really.
Bhante, the next question: how do I stay ambitious and disciplined without turning it into craving or ego? What does right effort look like in modern life?
Yeah, right effort doesn't really have anything to do with ambition, for sure. It doesn't have so much to do with discipline either. Maybe a little bit. Right effort is kind of, yeah, I think you could say that it's related to discipline, but maybe not in the way that we think. Right effort is just the application of the mind in the right way. Normally we don't apply the mind. We just let the mind do its thing and kind of distract. Right effort should not be our tool. Right effort is not the tool. The tool is mindfulness. But effort is a quality of that cultivation of mindfulness. I mean, initiating the act of being mindful requires effort or involves effort. So that's what right effort is. But it doesn't even have anything to do with what you'd normally call discipline in terms of pushing yourself to do something, say, I've got to do it. That's not right effort. Right effort is being mindful. You really shouldn't approach the meditation as something that you force yourself to do. You should instead be mindful of all the things that are keeping you from doing it, because then you're already mindful, and then it's very easy to do formal practice. But when you talk about in modern life, right effort doesn't have anything to do with life. It has to do with mindfulness. It has to do with meditation. So it has nothing to do with how you live your life. That's not right effort. Right effort is related to how mindful you are. Because to do that requires effort.
The next question, Bhante: what are the benefits of using one location, for example, at home, for walking and sitting meditation?
You want to get into the habit of continuous mindfulness. It's called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where you don't break the chain of mindfulness. So you're working towards moment after moment of being mindful. And so after walking, you don't want to just stand up or get distracted by anything. You want to mindfully walk to your sitting mat. The teacher was constantly, repeatedly reminding us of this. And if you watched him practice, you could see it as well. After walking was done, even after the alarm, we'd practice together and there would be this alarm and the alarm would be beeping. He'd just kind of ignore it, do his thing. And when he was ready, he would switch from walking to sitting mindfully. And he told us about this. He said, one way of doing it is if you're doing, say, the 6th walking step, you can go to the 5th walking step, the 4th walking step. As you approach your mat, reduce down to the 1st walking step, like an airplane landing, he said. And then when you sit down mindfully, but you want to have every moment of mindfulness. So telling the meditators to walk and sit in the same place, I mean, it should seem obvious as to how that relates, but it's much less likely that you're going to be able to cultivate that continuity if you're walking in one place and sitting in another. It's just not really feasible. If you have to. I mean, if you're outside of a meditation center, I probably shouldn't be so hard on people in the at-home course. So if you have to do walking in one place and sitting in another, really try to make them close by. But again, do what you can. And if it means the difference between actually practicing and not practicing, okay, practicing in 2 different places is certainly doable and it's not the end of the world. It's just not recommended, let's put it that way. And certainly in an intensive course, we would ask you to walk and sit in the same place.
The next question, Bante. Is it healthier for a layperson to still have an ego? How should we approach no self? There are cases of people who, when the ego is dissolved, usually with drugs, go into psychosis and disassociation.
Oh, there's a lot in there. Okay. Nobody has an ego. That's not a real thing. You don't have an ego. Dissolving of the ego, therefore, is not a thing either. Drugs don't have anything really to do with the ego. You might say a sense. They disturb your sense of recognition. Like if you see your hand, if you're in a certain drug-induced haze or trip, you won't recognize that as my hand. And that is kind of similar to some of the things that happen. I mean, that can happen in mindfulness meditation as well, but that's not loss of ego. That's just the breaking up of this process of identification. Oh, that's my hand, for example. But that's not ego. That's not dissolving the ego. That's just the process. The important thing is that through mindfulness, you see this process, you see this reality. There's no benefit to keeping. So what lay people tend to have, or what non-Buddhist or non-practitioners have that practitioners of mindfulness have less of, is ego as a quality, right? Not an ego or the ego, but ego in terms of identifying with things. This is me, this is mine. Clinging to things, not identifying, because even the Buddha would look at his hand and know this is his hand, it's not somebody else's hand. He wouldn't say, whoa, whose hand is that? He identified, this is my hand, but there was no sense of attachment, mine. That's the point. There was nothing like that. So what non-practitioners have is this attachment, so that if the hand gets hurt, they're upset. If the hand starts to wrinkle, they're upset. If the hand turns color, they're upset. If the hand is threatened, they get upset. That means ego. That's attachment to self, me, mine, and so on. This disappears not because you don't recognize it as my hand, like you would by taking drugs or sometimes through the practice of mindfulness, but because you understand that hand isn't a thing that exists. Me and mine aren't realities. Reality is experience. You don't even see a hand. You just see light. You see a vision. You don't feel the hand, you feel a feeling. And all of the things that make up what we call a hand are momentary. They arise and they cease. And as you see that, you start to understand that deep beneath all of the things that you might cling to as me and mine, there's only moments of experience. There's no danger of losing your hand because there's no hand in the first place. There's no danger that we have to worry about or fear. Even death is not something that should be feared at all. Because death of a person is just death of not something that didn't exist in the first place. It's that wisdom and understanding that frees you from all of the many things that what you call lay people worry about. But lay people in Buddhism, by practicing, they're not really lay people anymore. Out of the realm of the discipline, a person, a householder that we call them, someone living in a house, can be very far from what we might call a lay person, in that they are wise and skilled, and they can live their lives free from the stress and suffering that comes from attachment to self. So, the basic, just having corrected the idea of there being a ego, the basic thrust of your question is still, the answer is still no. Nobody benefits from having ego, from having attachment to self. Not even people living in a house. You could argue it makes it difficult to live as a layperson, but that's just because living as a layperson is difficult from a Buddhist perspective anyway. There's so many things that you're voluntarily engaging in, like socializing, partying, having to go to parties where people are drinking, having to engage in questionable employment situations where you're forced to compromise your ethics for money, things like this, which is why ultimately a Buddhist practitioner gives up most of the worldly life. Quite common, obviously, for them to give up the worldly life entirely and become monastics. We have rooms here if you're interested. If anybody wants to come and follow that route, we have rooms, we have place. I've come here with the vision, with the idea that this would make a good place to allow for a community, allow for people to have the opportunity to become real spiritual leaders, to become those who offer this to the world, this practice, this path, and continue the offering into the future. So there's no benefit, but there's not really any benefit in staying in the lay life at all, or in the household life even. So ultimate benefit? No, there's no benefit to. Well, first of all, there's no benefit to ego whatsoever. The thing is, once you start to, what you say, dissolve the ego, but has nothing to do with what you're talking about in terms of drugs. As you start to let go of me and mine, in terms of clinging, you do get turned off by the household life. More inclined to a more peaceful and simple life. But that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
The next question, Bhante. How does Buddhism distinguish between healthy sexual desire and attachment or craving? And how can someone practice mindfulness without suppressing their sexuality?
There is no sexual desire. There's no desire without attachment or craving. Desire and craving are synonymous, and attachment is the inevitable consequence of desire or craving. So none of it is healthy from a mental perspective. But that being said, you do bring up an important point that, again, this word suppressing, but I think we mean more repressing. Pressing down, repressing, I think is the word. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Suppressing, repressing, but let's be clear, we're talking about the idea of pushing it away, disliking it, having aversion towards it, and trying to control it, trying to fix it, which is not mindfulness. And it's a very important point in regards to desire that it doesn't work. It isn't the solution. The solution is to see clearly, which comes from being mindful. So let's be a little bit clear and nitpicky here. When you say suppressing their sexuality, sexuality isn't, and whatever you're referring to isn't you or yours. So that's important to understand. Otherwise, because the way you're talking about it is as it's me and mine. You know, I have this thing and you're telling me to like cut off a limb or something, right? But it's not a limb. And there is no thing to cut the limb off from in the first place. There are only moments of desire, moments of craving that lead to moments of attachment, or lead to the state of being attached, which ultimately leads to more craving and suffering when you don't get what you want. It can lead to anger. It can lead to fighting. It's why why married couples often fight and just end up hating each other because of the passion and the need to be pleased, the need to have your partner be the way you want them to be. And when your wants and needs change and they change in a different way, there's vicious fighting, no? That goes on between romantic couples. Not to mention sexual violence, sexual assault, horrific things that happen in the world happen every day, that happen because of this desire. Right, so where was I going? Yeah, none of it's really healthy, but yes, there are moments of desire. And the key is to face them. It's very simple and incredibly effective. But it takes effort. This is a good example of where it takes effort because it's much easier in the short term to just allow yourself to enjoy things, to just encourage the cycle of addiction. Same goes with drug addicts. I mean, there's nothing categorically different between someone who's addicted to sex and someone who's addicted to ecstasy. I don't know. I've never took ecstasy, but something that's highly addictive and highly pleasurable. They're both drugs. They both make you happy. I mean, they give you pleasure. They don't really make you happy. But it's very easy to get caught in that cycle, and that's laziness. It's challenging to constantly approach with mindfulness. It's not really taxing or tiring to really be mindful. And that's kind of how you know when you're being mindful versus whether you're repressing. If you're repressing it, taxing, tiring, give you headaches even. But if you're mindful, maybe you have a headache or you're tired, there's a clarity of mind and there's a peace of mind and there's a freedom from that. So you're not, the goal, the practice is not to push away desire, just as it's not to push away aversion. It's to see the desire, see the aversion, and more importantly, to see the objects of desire and the objects of aversion. Because when you do that, you have this, what was referred to as suppressing, but you reach this non-arising of the greed and the anger. And so this is freedom, which is great, but it's also clarity, because that freedom is only temporary. That's why they call it suppression. It's not really, I mean, they're suppressed. So I think it's okay to say that. But it means they just haven't arisen, and they have the potential to arise in the future. But because of the clarity of mind that that brings, you're then able to see the objects of desire more clearly, to see the desire more clearly. And it's kind of magical. You just lose interest. You just aren't craving for pleasure. I mean, it's not a one-off thing where it's magic, where you say a word and hocus pocus, magic happens. But it is magical. It just takes work and effort and patience and persistence. But you can see the results quite, almost instantly. Once you get the hang of being mindful, you can verify for yourself, even in a moment, that it does work. It just requires you the effort to do it again and again and again until your habit changes. But there's wisdom involved. It really does show you, not intellectually, but viscerally, that those things are not worth it. They're not valuable, and you just get tired of them. You don't think to yourself, oh yeah, that's not valuable. You just don't perceive it as valuable anymore, as enticing. You get tired of it. Do it enough, and that's the result. There is no maybes. There is no possiblies about it. It's what happened. That's a good example of where effort is required, because it doesn't happen unless you put in the effort to do it again and again and again. But it does happen if you do. I mean, the best way to develop effort is to have some formality, have the structure of a course. That's why we do these courses. It sounds kind of artificial, and it is artificial, but artificial isn't always bad. Artificial is the structure that you require when you're growing, like training wheels. Training wheels are artificial. They don't feel great, but the best way to learn how to ride a bike.
The next question, Bante. What is the difference between the at-home course and an intensive course, apart from time duration? Is there any difference in technique? Is a person who has only completed the at-home course missing out on something if they still practice every day for long hours? Is it possible for such a person to become a Sotapanna?
It is possible, but it's an order of magnitude less likely, more difficult, less likely. I guess let's put it that way. Because yes, there is something missing from the at-home course. There's part of the intensive course that we just can't do. I've even tried to do intensive courses remotely and have never had any luck. It's just not the same. Maybe I'm not sure if maybe I have once, but I really don't. I keep saying I'm never going to do the intensive course remotely again, because it keeps failing. And people just don't. It's difficult to be on your own and to go through that. It's a whole different thing. So I mean, it's not it just means they aren't able to complete it. So yeah, it is something very different. And again, getting back to this idea of continuity, why we practice walking and sitting in the same place. Practicing 8-10 hours a day is a whole different thing. It's not just more, it's an order of magnitude different, meaning it's on a whole other level. The state of mind is on a whole other level. So yes, you can gradually potentially get there practicing occasionally, but it's a lot different. I mean, it can change your life and set you on a good path for the future. So that, I think the at-home course has great value, but the value is on a whole other level compared to the intensive course. And no, there is more to it. It's not, we don't give you everything. And so, I mean, if it was easy to teach it remotely, what I meant is that I would. We're not trying to force you to come all the way to Sri Lanka, which is a very difficult thing to do, I appreciate. But the practicality of it is you're just never going to get there on your own. I mean, or you're never going to be able to do something like that at home unless you've done it at our center first, or at a center first, unless you've done it under the direct guidance of a teacher first, which has worked. I have had people from time to time do further courses at home, but never had any luck with a new meditator. It's just not the kind of thing that lends itself well to remote teaching.
The next question, Bante. Is the Mahasi technique, noting, the only way to Nibbana in this day and age? Is samatha useless for realizing Nibbana?
Oh, I mean, no and no. Is it the only way? No, it's not the only way. You could say mindfulness is the only way. And you could also say that the best way to develop mindfulness is through, well, reminding yourself. I mean, it's not the Mahasi technique, it's a mantra, which is the basis of most meditation. It's just that this mantra is focused on reality. And so, yes, that is necessary. Is a mantra necessary? No. There are people who are in a position to become enlightened just naturally, just by having a correction from hearing the words of the Buddha, being told the truth by the Buddha. So it depends very much on the individual. But as you say, in this day and age, for most people, I'm inclined to think that it's the best way and that it's head and shoulders above any other way. But I mean, what use are those words to someone who is not also in agreement, right? Because every tradition says pretty much the same thing, or many traditions say the same thing about their own practice. So those words are not that valuable. But I mean, it's good you've got me on record. Now you can go and tell other people this is what I've said. I think it's the best, and I don't think it's the only way. I just do think it's better. I'm convinced that. I mean, just try it. You really can see the direct connection. The problem is there's so much intellectual doubt over it. It just doesn't seem right. I have this idea that meditation is just sitting there doing nothing. I guess. I mean, Some people do practice that sort of meditation. But traditionally, even before the Buddha, this mantra, the idea of a mantra, I mean, why do we have this word mantra at all? Mostly because of meditation. Outside of Buddhism, they have mantras, because they focus your attention and they remind you. Remember, the word isn't mindfulness. The word is remembrance. Mindfulness is an English word that doesn't translate well from sati. Sati is better translated as something as remembrance or reminding. So when you remind yourself, hey, this is what it is, that keeps you present. It keeps you clear of mind. That's the whole meaning of this word sati. So yeah, it's not the Mahasi noting, it's the idea of a mantra. Why are we using a mantra? It reminds you of the object. It reminds you of the basic essence of the object, free from any judgment, any proliferation, any extrapolation. So first part. Second part is samatha useless. I mean, I've said several times tonight even that samatha is not useless, but I've pointed out that it's limited in its value. It's never going to lead you all the way, but it can be very valuable as a precursor to vipassana. So that's the place of samatha meditation. Again, as I also said tonight, it can be problematic in that people get attached to it and believe it to be more than it is. And then argue and say, because you don't have this great blissful state that I have, you're not practicing correctly. But they can't see beyond their own bliss. I've come in contact with this before. It's a problem when people have those sorts of beliefs, dogmatic views.
The next question, Bante. What should I do when distractions take over the entire meditation session? I do note them, but my mind seems unable to stay with the main objects, so much so that I never get to all the touch points. This has been the case for months now.
Yeah, well, don't try to do all the touch points. That's for intensive practice. Or, during the at-home course, it's a period where we're trying to simulate to some extent the intensive course. But even then, shouldn't be discouraged that you're not able to go through them. I guess I would say if you're practicing consistently and you're not able to get through the points even once, well, I mean, first of all, start with fewer and train yourself up to be able to do more. But in the long term, you should be able to get through them at least once. That's sort of my rule of thumb. I made that up myself. Honestly, I didn't get that from my teacher, so I'll admit that. But that's my rule of thumb for my students, especially in the at-home course, try to get through them at least once. So if you're not able to, again, start with fewer, work towards more, but try to identify why it is that you're not. So the distraction, try and note distracted, but if the distraction is taking over, it's not, the distraction isn't just the problem. The problem is why you're distracted. It can be desire, it can be aversion, it can be worry, it can be fear. There's some emotion involved that's triggering and feeding the distraction that that you're probably not as mindful of as you should be, especially outside of practice. So a big part of the practice is going to be being mindful in your daily life. That being said, in the end, we're not trying to stop the mind from thinking, so don't be discouraged when there's lots of thought. Just note to yourself, distracted or thinking, and move on. Let it go.
The next question, Bhante. How can we respond kindly when family members judge Buddhism mainly by monks' robes and temple decorations instead of the practice itself?
I don't quite understand. You're suggesting that they criticize monks' robes and temple decorations, or that's what they see as important? Or what kind of parents are these? Are these Buddhist parents or non-Buddhist parents? You say they judge Buddhism. Okay, but let's get to the essence of your question, the difference between these externalities and actual practice. Be an example for your parents. Both of my parents are now practicing meditation. Not as much as someone doing the at-home course, but they've both started. This is after me being a Buddhist for 26 years. So there will be people in your life who are interested in the practice, and there will be people in your life who are not interested in the practice. And you'll drift away from those who are not interested just naturally. You don't have to avoid them or run away from them, but you'll naturally incline towards people who are also interested in mindfulness. That's just, I mean, it's not, it shouldn't be surprising. So you practice mindfulness on your own, and that will affect the people around you in a good way. Because you arguing with people is not you being mindful. You trying to convince other people is not usually really you being mindful either. But if you're mindful, you will attract people who are also interested in mindfulness. And I mean, you'll just be a resource. I've been a resource to my younger sister. I went to her residence in University of Toronto many years ago. I was a resource, and that feels great, to be someone who knows something that is useful for other people. This is what you want to be. You know, you be there for others, and you have this knowledge and this wisdom, this experience that you can share with others. Is really how you approach everyone, family, not family. Family is not the most important thing. The Buddha talked about how family is like good luck. If you've got a good family, it's like having good luck, because families support each other. Good family supports each other. If you have a bad family, it's bad luck. But family is not what your criteria for who's important to focus your attention on. I mean, ultimately you focus your attention on yourself, but secondary from that, you focus your attention on whoever you're with, whoever's near you. And people will come or will go depending on them, depending on their qualities of mind. Didn't really answer your question, I guess. Don't really quite understand it. But yeah, as far as dissuading people from fixating on externalities, you've got that's more important than the specific externalities you're referring to. So the problem here is that these people are fixated on things that aren't important. This is the essence of it. The Buddha said, if one sees as essential that which is not essential, or sees as the core what is not core, sees as essential what is not essential, and what is essential, sees as essential what is not essential, and what is essential they see as not essential. Such a person never gets to the essence, never gets to what is truly essential, truly meaningful. But they have wrong micca gochara sampanno. They have wrong wrong pasture, which means they're wrong involvement. They get caught up in the wrong things, right? They're criticizing this monk's robes or criticizing these decorations, I guess, or they're raving about them. Oh, this monastery has such beautiful decorations. These monks' robes are beautiful, all that sort of thing. But it's just their attitude is wrong. And so all you have to do is be an example. If someone asks about, are robes important? You say, no, they're not important. And you can explain why they're not important, because you have experience and knowledge with what is truly important. Mostly you just be mindful and everything else comes.
The next question, Bante. Is it a good sign if it becomes easier to focus on the rising and falling, and there is an overwhelming feeling of apathy and lack of joy?
Well, something getting easier, you could say, is a good sign, but I wouldn't cling to it. I mean, you don't want to cling to it. And it can happen that you cling to that, and you cling to the idea of me and mine, I'm getting better at this, and you're pleased by that. And that can lead to complacency, it can lead to attachment, it can even lead to egoism. So that's potentially a good sign. Apathy isn't really a good sign. I mean, it's not a great word for what we're striving for. Equanimity. I guess you could describe it as apathy, but the problem is apathy is seen in a negative light. And so when you use words like that, you kind of have a judgment already. Usually, if you use that word, it means you don't like it. You have a negative idea of this equanimity, because apathy, equanimity, what are they? They're just words. But apathy, but it's as descriptive, is usually referring to some kind of not caring either way. I don't care if I develop myself, become a better person. So Buddhism is not really that. It's apathy towards externalities, in the sense that you don't care if you experience pleasure or pain, but it's not apathy the way we normally use it. We think of an apathetic person as someone who is just kind of resigned miserably, right? Buddhists aren't miserable. Buddhists are at peace, and they have equanimity because they don't care, because they see it's silly to care. It's just stressful to care. But they do care very much about goodness and clarity and purity and wisdom and focus and ethics. These are very important. They just don't care in terms of not being worried or scared or anything like that. They have strength of mind. It's not apathy. That's not a great word for it. So if you have apathy, and the lack of joy, again, lack of anything is not a problem. It's only when you want to feel joy that you have a problem. But joy is, like everything else, something that comes and goes. So it's not the goal. What's more interesting is that you are worried or concerned about your perceived lack of joy, lack of something. Let's replace joy with just something. Anything that you're worried about, concerned about, disliking. Maybe you dislike the fact that you don't have joy. Joy comes and goes, just like sorrow. They're not the goal. And if you see them as the goal, you're just going to be disappointed.
Bante, we've reached the end of the second hour, so we will end our Dhamma group session there. As always, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and insight and for sharing the Dhamma with us. I'm sure many of us find deep value in that. Thank you so much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I'm here to offer my own knowledge and experience, but I'm not here as God or Buddha or your teacher. Teacher is such a difficult word because there's no question that I'm a teacher, right? But it's kind of just like there's no question that your first grade math teacher was also a teacher. It's just a position. It's not me or mine. So don't, I caution anyone against, I caution all of us against being attached to a person or personality. Likewise, if you don't like me, if you think what I'm saying is wrong, that can also be a problem. If you just see me as, the me is a problem. Take the knowledge and the wisdom, and if it's not knowledge, if it's not wisdom, if it's wrong, that's wrong. No problem. But anything about Buddhism, you just come fresh. So I can offer that to you. I'm happy to be able to do that. I'm also happy that there are other people here, and I would like them to also appreciate when they do. Dhamma dissemination.
Okay. I think you're cutting off.
Yeah.
Or is it just for me?
Unfortunately, your connection is a little bit choppy, Bhante. We're only getting bits and pieces of what you're saying.
It's always towards the end.
I don't know why
Let's
that
give-
happens.
It's always in the
Anyway,
end.
We hear you
You
now,
cut-
Bhante.
you
why
cut
that
cut
happens at the end.
Yes, where you started to say you would like other person and then it cut off.
Okay, well, please, I appreciate that other people do participate, and thank you for the technical team. I know that's not the most glamorous of work, but clearly everyone appreciates that you're here to make it happen, that without that work it wouldn't be possible. So, and those of you who are bold enough to speak, Dalaur and Subitsu especially, who are bold enough to be our MC, I guess you call them, to take the lead. Appreciate that. Appreciate everyone asking questions as well. You're a part of this, and you are the catalyst for the rising of Dhamma discussion. So thank you for your questions. It's a very sign of a heightened mind that someone is thoughtful enough to ask a good question, ask a question that actually touches upon their lives and what they're concerned about. So I appreciate that, and everyone who's come to listen, our audience, those of you who are here to maybe learn something about the Dhamma. That's always a great thing for you in your lives, and it's a great thing for us that encourages us to keep doing this. And we see people are still interested in these good things. So, with the power of all of the goodness that we have cultivated at every moment of being here involved in our discussion of the Dhamma and our reading of the great Mahasi Sayadaw's works, and learning about the Buddha's works, which are the greatest of all. May the power of all of that goodness and all of the goodness that you've all cultivated in this lifetime and in past lifetimes, coupled with the goodness of the Buddha, the greatness of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. May you all be protected from spiritual and physical harm. May you be free from enmity and sickness and danger and calamity of all sorts. May you progress on the Buddha's teaching. May you have strength and health and happiness and a long life to continue to practice the Buddha's teaching and practice the teaching that leads to peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. May you all find the goal of freedom through letting go, through seeing clearly, through mindfulness.
Sadhu,
Sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu. I will end the stream there. Thank you, everyone.